Hey everyone, it's Pitico from Daydream Nation, and look who I've got back in the seat again. It's John Clauser. How are you, mate?
Doing good, mate. Doing good.
Fantastic. We're doing another rock postcards show, and the premise of this show is when one of us sends a CD or an album by plane from Australia to America or vice versa. And today, John has introduced me into a band called Hotel, and the album is called Half Moon Silver from 1980. So this is what I would call an American-orientated rock band. Recently had a reissue on the Rock Candy label, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about it and provide a little bit of a spotlight. And this band is from Birmingham, Alabama, which is in John's neck of the woods. Before I throw into the album what I think about it, John, any background to how you first discovered this band or heard about Hotel?
Right. So how I came to know about Hotel was I've only lived in Alabama for about 20 years. So
only,
yes, it seems like it's. Well, I'm old, so there you go. But I would come to hear of this guy, Mark Phillips.
Nice.
He was the singer and keyboard player, and I would learn of him, and I would hear his stories of his band that he played in called Hotel. It took me a while to finally get these albums by him or by them, and I eventually did. But that's just really how I came to learn about them. I think I had bought I think Mark actually had a CD version before the Rock Candy versions came out. He had like a self-produced something, from his own studio, because he had a recording studio here in Birmingham. He recorded a lot of jingles and a lot of stuff like that. But that's really kind of how I got to know about Hotel. And then just the more I started really listening to these albums, and I started digging in about the history, these guys were started out back in 1972 and basically played the Southeast circuit. These guys were kind of legends around this area. Musicianship was just, the story goes, if you wanted to hear a Steely Dan song done correctly in a club, these guys were who you wanted to see do it, and that was their style. And they would eventually be signed to MCA Records, and they only did the two albums. That's the debut. So, which had a couple of big hits off of it as well, but it just, it just tanked. Unfortunately, they just didn't get the label support. But it was essentially through getting to be around Mark Phillips a little bit. That's how I got to know more about Hotel. So
yeah, thanks. Nice intro. Just doing some research. This band was built around the central duo of Mark Phillips and Tommy Calton. And they were signed to Mercury in 1977. They did one single and then it sunk without a trace. And it was fortuitously on a plane journey. The Scotti Brothers, which is a well-known record label in America, where a rep there was handed a tape by producer Dane Eric, who seems to be a bit of a mentor for this band. And the rest is sort of history. They got signed to MCA Records, and So I'll talk a little bit about the album, and you might want to put that up again. Hotel Half Moon Silver from the July 1980 it was released. So this is the follow-up to the first one, and what I've got to say, my initial impression is the musicianship is impeccable. It is top notch. So they are obviously a Musos Muzo type of band, and I would put that in the wheelhouse of Toto. So if you like your Toto, you like your Sticks, you like your Steely Dan, etc., where the musicianship is just top notch, this is the band for you. Another thing is that the thing that sticks out to me is Mark Phillips' vocals. They're wonderful, but you hear different sort of sides to his vocals through every track through the album. So you might hear one track and you go, oh, there's a bit of a Steve Perry tonality. And then you go to another track and you go, oh, that sounds like Glenn Fry. It's just, he's got many different sides to them. So, and also their lyrics were a little bit beyond the cliches of American orientated rock. So there was a lot of AOR that was pappy, sentimental, and very schmaltzy. There's a kind of a little bit of grit to this album that puts it a little bit above that schmaltz that a lot of those bands in that era were doing. So I guess they were following the crowd, but they were trying to be a little bit more innovative and do something different. But obviously, they didn't really break through, and they were kind of hometown heroes. So maybe if I can just go through the tracks, and John, feel free to chime in if you agree or disagree. So it starts off with a boomer of an opening track called A Place and Time, in brackets, Refugee.
Now you realize you're a refugee when life's not turning out like it's meant to be.
It's a tightly structured song. It's got a lot of drive. It starts off with the sounds of an airport lounge. So you put the headphones and you hear, oh, okay, all this sort of noises from you would hear in an airport. And, it's well played. It's in the Toto wheelhouse, and I love Toto. It's got those driving guitar lines, well-produced melodic rock. There's great separation between the instruments, and that's what you need. It's not muddied at all.
Nope.
And the lyrics are interesting. There's a repeat lyric all the way through this song that you realize you're a refugee. So I think it's a reference that when people come to America, from their country, they, maybe to immigrate or whatnot, they realize that maybe they're not American, but they're actually a refugee, and they're trying to navigate their way through that sort of those sort of feelings and that sort of geography. So I thought that was an interesting opening track. So it's got a little bit of social commentary, and that's a bit unusual for an AOR album, because it's mostly about matters of the heart and So big tick first song. The second one is Coldblooded Red Hot Love, Foreigner, I wrote down. So it's got a great counterpoint between bass, keyboards, and vocals. Good separation of instruments in the production, but it's really interesting. You've got these counterpoints with those three instruments. Smoking guitar. Now, one thing is going to be a theme through my commentary is that there's this really smoking guitar lines, whether they're outros, whether they're a lead break, and you reliably inform me that it's probably Tommy Carlton, because I haven't got the physical album and I've had to do research, and I wasn't 100% sure, but Tommy's guitar playing is sublime. Great tonality, and it's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, very, very tasty player.
Yep. Now That She Loves You, it's hooky, it's melodic, it's 3 minutes of 42 seconds of hooky, infectious guitar bass, it's got a great guitar break. It's, I like that song a lot. Ned and Mary is very like a Journey song. It's an up-tempo, bouncy. It's in a major key, meaning it's all happy. Sort of Mark Phillips is singing over the melody, and then he draws the band into this full chorus harmony. Now, that's another thing I've got to say is that the band are fine singers. So you've got a lot of vocalists in the band, and that really adds a dimension and a layer to this music that gives it a bit of a lift. That the harmonies are quite sublime, really,
Yes.
really good, and puts it above the pack. Again, great lead break, fantastic musicianship, and there's a lot of twin guitar harmonies. So that, my friend, would be Tommy and Michael Reed. Would Michael Reed be the other guitarist? Yep.
That would be my guess. Yes.
Okay.
That's this guy right there. Yeah.
Okay, great. Half Moon Silver. So this is a nice song, quiet acoustic guitar start, and then goes into a ballad that reminds me of America and the Horse with No Name. I like it.
Yeah.
It's nice.
A little bit. Yeah.
But it's got their own style, and it's not a carbon copy. So although, you know, as we're going through the show, I'm saying it sounds like this, sounds like that, I'm not meaning that it copies those bands, but it gives the viewers a little bit of an understanding. And obviously in this show, I'll put a little few snippets of songs so you get a little bit of a feel. Blind Side of Love. So this one's interesting. Phillips actually shows a bit of grit in his voice. So he's not all saccharine Steve Perry. There's a little bit of grit, bit of growl, and his lyrics on this song are not the usual sentimental pap. You know,
now, I will say the keyboard player Lee Bergeron actually rates this song. Mark doesn't get a songwriting credit on this one.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, not at all. There's a line in this song that really sort of is the theme and must have hit from the blind side of love. So this is a little bit on the darker side. Interesting angles. It avoids the cliches of AOR. Yeah, it's a good song. It's late. It's got an acoustic start in a minor key. It's catchy. It's melodic. Has a nice build, and then it sort of swirls this dramatic crescendo to the chorus. So again, it has those Toto flourishes, because Toto are very renowned for their songs where they have all these multiple crescendos and flourishes. So I'm sure that they were sort of ear to the ground and hearing there was a bit of a Toto influence in this song. So no, I like it. It's late. Wanting You Too Many Times, and they spell it you and the number 2, which is interesting. This is a bit angry, less happy.
I said I was on and thinking how to say I won't hurt you, I won't hurt you if you glance this way again.
You can see there's a bit of yearning and frustration in the lyrics. It has a bit of a new wave groove. So I've read some commentary that this album is sort of going in the new wave direction. I don't see that exactly, but this is probably as new wave as any track on this album gets, because of maybe the guitar lines are a little bit more driving, a bit more spiky, and there's a bit more grit, which was kind of maybe on the edge of being new wave. But anyway, that's sort of debatable. Yeah. I actually wrote that this is their Rosanna because it has a lot of layers. It's a minor quibble. It's probably the drumming. And I don't know if this is the production or not, but it feels a bit light. Could be a little bit more oomph in the bottom end. What's your view on that?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was just the production. Not everything that was coming out in the late 70s, early 80s had John Bottom's drum sound. So maybe it could have been the studio. It could have been how it was recorded.
It just seems a little bit light. And Eric Dane was actually the producer. So all right. So now we're in the business end. It's how it feels. Close your eyes and you think it's Journey. It's very much a Steve Perry sounding vocal, and it could slot into Raised on Radio, any of these tracks. So it's a complete head scratch why this album was not more successful, because there's a couple of radio hits here. There's a couple of songs that could have done really, really well. And then you've got Talk to Me, which is a ballad. Phillips has got now a bit of a Don Henley sort of tonality about it. And I like the jazzy guitar at the end. It's a little, he goes all George Benson. And it's a super end to the album. So the playing on this album's fantastic. So as I said, it's a Musos album. There's hooks aplenty. You've got a singer that's got interesting tonality, and it's not just sort of, there's sometimes he's got the sweet tone, sometimes he's got a bit of grit. And then, the songwriting is it's decent. The arrangements are tightly structured, and it's just a notch above your average saccharine AOR album.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They really were that kind of, like you said, the Musos Muzo. That's really what these guys were. So just to give some of your viewers a little look. So this is on the inside of the album. So that's another picture of the band. You got Mark Phillips looking all mean looking there on the far right with his arms crossed. But you got of course the lyric sheet here. So you got that. Of course this is the back of the back of the album right here. So you got all the guys. You got great picture here. You got all the guys looking all nice and smiley, and then you got Mark all looking all serious and stuff. But the thing about, you talk about Toto. So I want to read you from Mark's book here. A little section here in regards to Toto. They actually had a chance to open for Toto a few times, probably just around the Southeast.
Right.
So let's see. When Hotel opened for Toto, one thing stood out quickly. They were frighteningly good. The rock band formed in LA in 1977 became one of the best-selling bands in their era. After hearing them play, I realized how good we needed to be if we wanted to make it in the industry. I also realized that no matter what profession you're in, there is always someone out there who's better than you. Yes. There's no room for business in the business for slackers. So one night while sitting with our band members, I told them, if we can't be that good, we might as well give up the ship. Toto scared me to death with their musicianship, energy, and total mastery of their crafts. It was obvious there were no weak links in Toto. So that was, you talk about Toto. Well, I think Mark saw that and said, okay, we need to pattern ourselves after this. And not a bad band to pattern themselves after too. You talk about Mark Phillips's voice. Now, here's the interesting thing about Mark. In mid 2000s, he was stricken with throat cancer.
Wow.
And beat it. Of course, he still had that voice, that soulful voice, but now when you heard him sing, it has much more of a rasp to it, like a raspy James Brown kind of feel to it. So it's a lot
like a Rod Stewart.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I could probably see that a little bit. I could kind of see that a little bit, but at his core, Mark was very soulful. Yeah. He would do a solo album, and one of the songs he does, I think it was an original. It was a song called "Papa Was a Preacher Man," and he just belts this out with this soulful grit. This gritty grit to it. So it's like so he really came back from the throat cancer almost sounding better than he probably ever had before, and to some people. Now, unfortunately, Mark passed away from COVID a couple of years ago. a lot. This area misses him greatly. Mark would get into ministry, and he especially got into prison ministry. That was where his big focus turned into, and he had a solid heart for prison ministry. So he really kind of leaned toward that. But he also still ran he had a studio here in Birmingham, and a lot of the musicians in the band still kind of did their own thing, whether it was here or they moved. But the one thing that I've gleaned from friends that I have on Facebook who have worked with Mark or Tommy or some of the other guys is just these guys are some of the kindest human beings you could ever meet and you could ever want as a friend, and that's something you don't always hear in musicians. When you get musicians, most of the time they come across standoffish. They don't want to give back. These guys were willing to give back, and they were willing to help you out in your sessions or whatever. And they were extremely professional about it, but they had a precision about their playing and their talent that was so infectious, and it influenced so many people throughout the Birmingham area. You would never think Birmingham, Alabama would be known for a hotbed of such great musicianship. And I'm really, and a lot of them don't get to make it, unfortunately. They get to be pretty big in the Southeast, and that's about it. After Hotel would break up, Mark and Tommy would form a band called Split the Dark. And they got a little bit of notice. They did a thing on MTV Basement Tapes, and where they got a little bit of notice. Toward the end of that little run, they brought in this new guitar player out of Georgia, a fellow by the name of Damon Johnson. Now, some of your viewers might know who Damon Johnson is if they know Brother Kane. If you maybe know him from, say, Red Star Riders or Thin Lizzy or Alice Cooper's band, even. So he's, he went on to make a name for himself. Mark was very respected in the Birmingham area. So when you hear of a legend coming to play the area, like say a Chuck Berry, and maybe you don't think he's a legend, but anyway, Chuck Berry comes to play Birmingham. Now, if you know anything about Chuck, he doesn't tour with a band. He goes city to city. Somebody arranges to get the best musicians from the town, and they go out there and they just hope and pray that they can just wing it, because you never know what Chuck's going to play anything in, but everything is all 3 chords. It's nothing difficult about any of his songs. So yeah, so that makes things challenging. They did the same thing for Bo Diddley. They did the same thing for Jerry Lee Lewis. Same kind of scenario. They get called, and they were like the backing band, for some of these guys. Yeah. So very well respected in this area. It's just a shame that the albums just never took off, and but very respected, very influential in this area.
Yeah, look, nicely put together there, John. I really appreciate hearing some of the backstory about the local area. I've got a theory that MCA wasn't the strongest marketing promotional record label. There's been a lot of acts that have been on that label and have just died. They needed a good video. Maybe they needed the right song. Maybe they needed the radio push. But there's always a lot of circumstances why the band didn't make it.
Again, I think it's the label push. Birmingham, Alabama. What? That's not LA. That's not New York. Who's gonna check people out in Birmingham, Alabama?
But there's always these little hot spots like Athens, Georgia.
Oh yeah.
A lot of bands seem to come out of those. So it's not necessarily the main hubs.
Oh yeah.
There's always little towns. So
yeah, it just I think it just wasn't the right time. Maybe it just didn't hit. They did do a little tour with Hall & Oates, for the Private Eyes tour.
Now that's a tour that would have that complements each other, because on a
Yes.
previous show we were talking about a certain bands that they go out on tour and the support is completely at polar to the main act, and
Yeah.
in a way it probably makes the main act look better because the audience absolutely detests them.
Right.
That one sounds like good synergy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how many shows they did with him on that tour, but I mean, you know, you want to talk about a mismatch. Now they did actually open for, or I think it was actually Judas Priest actually opened up for Hotel here in Birmingham.
What? That's crazy.
And I don't think Priest was happy about it, because he does Mark tells that story in the book.
I've got one. I can beat that. How's
Okay.
this? Rose Tattoo, supported by Air Supply.
Yeah.
And Rose Tattoo, when they came out on stage, they applauded Air Supply for getting through the performance. But I don't think they got bottled off stage. I think that, you know, the bikie crowd were very respectful and probably admired the guts of this band
Sure.
to get through it. It was in a pub in Sydney.
All right. Well,
So-
I think Mark would tell the story about when Judas Priest, he thinks that their little revenge gotcha thing was later on they would do the song "You Got Another Thing Coming," which they also had a song called that on their first album. So, you know, so maybe that was their little, we're going to get you on this one, of course, and that would be one of their biggest songs. So, but yeah, that was a funny story. But yeah, the Stranger Things. I don't remember what tour that was for Priest, but it was definitely before Screaming for Vengeance and probably before British Steel, I would imagine. So,
well, thank you, John. Really great to have a bit of a listen to this album. It's an album that's a bit out my wheelhouse, because I'm not a total connoisseur of AOR, even though as I get older, I seem to gravitate to a lot of this material. But I really like this album a lot. There's the album. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Please check out my music corner with John. He does some wonderful stuff. Put your comments of what you think of Hotel, or you know, maybe give us some ideas for some Aussie and Australian postcards that we can throw at each other for the next batch of shows. But yeah, we'll be putting a show very soon together. See you later. Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.